In June 2026, one of Anthropic's newest and most capable models spent 18 days unavailable, not to hackers, but to Anthropic's own paying customers. No crash, no outage. The US government had placed export control restrictions on foreign access to the model, and because Anthropic couldn't verify in real time who was behind each request, it suspended access for everyone, worldwide. The model was Fable 5. And that self-imposed shutdown is the clearest sign yet of something new. The strongest models now pass through a door most people don't know exists, and what happens there is starting to decide who gets the most powerful technology of our time. Increasingly, it isn't you. That shutdown ran on one government tool, export controls, a hard national security lever, but days earlier, Washington had built a second, softer one. On June 2nd, a presidential order invited the frontier companies to hand their strongest models to the government for a voluntary look, up to 30 days before broader external release. So there's now a spectrum of what can happen when a model reaches the door. It ships now. It waits for a voluntary review, or at the hard end, export limits can force it offline. The voluntary review forces no one. The company still controls the timing. It's just an invitation almost nobody wants to decline. Plenty of industries have never worked on finish it and sell it. You can't sell a new drug or fly a new jet without clearing inspection first. But software was different. It mostly shipped the moment it was ready. Now the inspection gate is swinging shut in front of software too, and specifically in front of the most capable AI, first in the country that builds most of the frontier. This video is about that door, what the order does, why parts of it are genuinely smart, and the consequence almost nobody prices in, because it's less about safety than about power. Here's the first surprise, and it cuts against the scary headline. The voluntary review is about the lightest gate a government could build. It's voluntary. There's no license, no official stamp a model legally needs. The review is capped at 30 days, and the company, not the state, still decides when to actually launch. On paper, Washington didn't seize the frontier. It asked for a look. If you were designing an early warning system that didn't strangle innovation, this is close to what you draw up. Then, watch what this pressure did in a single month. 3 leading frontier models shipped within weeks of each other, and each met a very different fate. Anthropic's Fable 5 ended up suspended worldwide for about 18 days under export controls. OpenAI's GPT 5.6 was allowed out, but at first only to a small vetted group of trusted partners. Google's Gemini 3.5, by contrast, shipped with no publicly reported comparable restriction. Same moment in time, 3 outcomes. And which of these you could actually use that month depended heavily on whether government pressure or restrictions touched it. So, why did Fable 5 draw export controls? A researcher found a jailbreak, a way to push the model past its own guardrails, and got it to hunt for software vulnerabilities and, in one case, produce working exploit code. The worry was that the wrong actor abroad could do the same, but Anthropic had no way to check in real time who was behind every request, so to comply with a restriction aimed at foreign access, it didn't limit a few users. It suspended the model for all of them, worldwide. The threat was real. The only compliance tool available was a sledgehammer. GPT 5.6 ran through the voluntary review instead. OpenAI's flagship had crossed the company's own high line for cyber risk on internal tests, genuinely useful for attacks. So, at the government's request, it went first to a small list of trusted partners, with everyone else told to wait a few weeks. Then, OpenAI did something revealing. It publicly pushed back on the very restriction it was following, warning that this kind of government access process shouldn't become the long-term default, that it keeps the best tools from the people who need them. When the gatekeeper's own guest is uneasy, pay attention. Now let's be genuinely fair. because it's easy to sneer at this. As government interventions go, the American approach is comparatively mild. It didn't punish an idea or a viewpoint. It reacted to a model that could be pushed to write exploit code and to another crossing a danger line its own maker had drawn. The voluntary side is opt-in, time-boxed, and can't block a launch. If some frontier models now test at high capability in cyber and biochemical risk areas, and the strongest increasingly do, then a 30-day look isn't tyranny. The risk it reacted to was real. At its best, this is a smoke detector. And here's where precision matters, because these three doors are not the same door. China runs a formal, mandatory regime for public-facing generative AI services. File with the state and pass a security review before you may offer such a service to the public in mainland China at all. It's aimed at public products, not every private model or internal research system. Europe's isn't a pre-approval. It's a web of binding legal duties that switch on automatically once a model crosses a compute threshold, marking it a systemic risk. And America's is the softest, a voluntary invitation to a pre-release look with no license and no legal force. Three genuinely different mechanisms. What they share isn't the rule, it's the instinct that someone should see the strongest models before the public does. So if the American approach is this restrained, where's the problem? Here's the thing. The problem isn't really in the fine print of any single order. It's in what a door, any door, does to who ends up holding the strongest AI. Slow the frontier down at a checkpoint, even a polite one, and four things start to happen, quietly, no matter how well-meaning that checkpoint is. The first effect, GPT 5.6, already showed us. When the strongest model has to clear a gate, the first ones through are rarely the public. Government reviewers see the best build first. A small list of trusted partners may get limited access next, and the public waits for a version that's been checked and sometimes trimmed. You get it last stopped being a worry and quietly became a schedule. Keep pulling that thread, and the best AI slowly turns into a tier you have to qualify for. The second effect, a gate leaks. You can suspend one company's model. You cannot suspend a model that's already been copied onto 10,000 laptops. Gate the big American labs too hard, and capability doesn't vanish. It migrates. To open weight models anyone can run offline, with no switch to flip, to countries that never asked. Meanwhile, only the giants can afford to sit at the government's table, and the testing agency becomes their main point of contact. Slowly, the frontier stops being fully private, steered now partly by whoever runs the door. The third effect is about time. A voluntary system is also a template. Today, it's a polite 30-day invitation the companies can technically decline. But the machinery, the access, the reviewers, the trusted partner lists is now built and running. Lawyers already describe it as a foundation for something firmer. OpenAI, remember, didn't say the review was wrong. It said it shouldn't become permanent. That's the quiet risk of a mild gate. It's the cheapest possible on-ramp to a strict one. Voluntary has a way of hardening into expected. Line up what the gate promises against what it also does. It promises to react to real danger, and with Fable 5's exploit code, it genuinely did. It promises to protect the public, while handing the public the model last. It promises a light voluntary touch, while quietly assembling the machinery for a heavier one. It promises to keep the frontier at home, even as the pressure pushes capability abroad. None of the promises are lies. They're just, every time, half the story. So here's the twist worth sitting with. This wasn't China, and it wasn't a license or a ban. The voluntary piece was the mildest gate around. Opt-in, 30 days, no approval required. And yet, in a single month, this whole apparatus split the strongest models from the ones you were actually allowed to use. The real dial was never dangerous versus safe. It runs from who holds the best model to who has to wait for it. Every gate, however polite, quietly answers that. And to be clear, some of this may genuinely be wise. A 30-day look at a model that can be pushed to write exploit code isn't obviously wrong. It might be exactly the caution a dangerous tool deserves. The real question isn't whether to ever check powerful AI. It's what this hardens into as the models get stronger and the few weeks get longer. Whether the door stays a smoke detector for real catastrophe or becomes a velvet rope that seats governments and a few labs at the front while the rest of us wait for the watered-down tier. For 18 days in June, the strongest models and the ones you were allowed to use were openly two different things. Then, for a vetted few, they simply stayed that way. That gap between the best model and your model is the real story of this whole shift, and it's only going to widen. So, here's my question. As these models cross into genuine danger, who should hold the key to the door? The labs that build them, the government that fears them, or the public that has to live with both? Tell me below. I'm second order, following the consequence right up to the door.